This week's Torah reading is called Ki Tisa, when you count. And the main subject of the reading is the whole long story of the golden calf. I'm not going to go into the details of the story. You can actually read it without my help. Now, there was a certain time in history where the non-Jews ruling over the land of Israel, they forbade the Jews to learn Torah. So therefore, what did we do? We instituted that instead of learning the 5 books of Moshe, we started reading certain pieces, parts of the prophets that have some relationship with the weekly Torah reading. In that case, at least we would not forget the whole idea of reading the Torah. Then with the time, this decree against the learning of Torah went out for some reason, and we just continued reading the Torah again, and together with this prophet reading. This is called Haftarah. That's the name it has. And usually, most of the times, has a relationship, as I explained, with the weekly Torah reading. The Haftarah of this particular week talks about a famous story about Eliahu, Navi, prophet Elijah, that he had a whole argument with the prophets of Baal and idolatry, etc., to the point that a fire came down from heaven and proved that God is the Lord, God is the Lord. That's what the people said when they saw such a great miracle, etc. At some point of the story, Eliyahu Navi asks the people, until when will you step in the 2 parts, so to speak, of reality? God is true, the Baal is true. God is true, idolatry is true. Like, the question should have been, why do you do idolatry? Why do you do avodah zarah? No, Eliyahu didn't ask that. Eliyahu asked, why do you go in both places? So we have to say that the question Eliyahu asked was a precise question, to the point that there's something even worse in going in 2 directions, so to speak. God is the Lord, the idolatry is the Lord. God is the Lord, and back and forth. There's something worse in that state of being than just being an idolater. What's the problem over here? The whole idea of idolatry is based very, very deeply into the heart of the person. The whole idea of idolatry is based on the people want flux from heaven. I want money. I want health. I want children. I want well-being, whatever that means for every single person. And a person feels that since when she prays to idolatry, really gets some results, therefore I should forget about God completely. Forget it. You pray, and he never answers. So you know what? I'm just going to pray to this idolatry. I'm just going to give honor to this idolatry, and that's it. I'm going to be fine. I'm going to put my trust on it, my hope on it, and it's going to be fine. However, there's a worse scenario, so to speak, which is called shituf. Shituf means association, in which a person believes in God. Yeah, he's the Lord of the Lords. He's above everything. But you know what? He's sleeping or whatever. He forgot about me. So I'm going to pray to this idolatry. And this idolatry is under God, but is in charge of things. In that particular scenario, situation, a person is going back and forth all the time. He doesn't have certainty of anything, not God and not the idolatry. Because after all, God is the Lord of the Lords. So I might ask him, but I don't get results. So I'm going to ask the idolatry, but he doesn't have really power. So he goes back and forth. And this situation is even worse than just saying, okay, I'm just going to pray to the idolatry. Forget about God. Who is God? Like Pharaoh said, I don't know a God. Why is it worse? Point number 1, it's much difficult to return to God when you are actually in a doubt. Who's right over here? If you have certainty that idolatry is false and it's completely empty, as soon as you realize that God is the Lord, like the people realized when Eliahu was making all this thing with the cow and the fire came down from heaven, etc., you just forget completely about idolatry and you just go with God. Whether you're going to have well-being or not, that's a different point. But when a person is in doubt and going back and forth, like Eliyahu said, even until when are you going to step in the 2 directions, so to speak? When you have doubts, it's much difficult to return and to realize that you did something wrong by serving some other idolatry and return to God. It's much, much more difficult. Second point, when a person is just focusing on his own particular well-being, completely forgets about God. And that focusing on your own well-being, whatever that may be, even a spiritual well-being, even feelings and sensations, etc., and thinking that you really have prophecy, like some Christian pastors, whatever, in that particular case, it's much more difficult to return because all your life goes around your own sensations. What you think is correct, what you think you're getting out of serving some other gods or whatever, and therefore, you're never going to think about, should I actually try God, the real one? Third point, you actually confuse people. Why? If people see you completely given to idolatry, so people are going to say, okay, this guy is wrong, forget about him, I'm not going to listen from him, I'm not going to learn from him, and so on. But if people see you going in both directions, sometimes I talk about God, the real one, sometimes I talk about idolatry, so people are going to be confused, and some people are going to follow you, because after all, what you say about God makes sense. This is what happens, between parentheses, in these great Mekubalim, Kabbalists in internet, etc., that some of them don't even believe in God, but they talk about Kabbalah and sometimes what the subjects that they talk about are correct. Like if you look in the book, it says what this guy is actually sharing. But in innermost self, he doesn't even believe in God. So people get confused and go astray in his path of this guy that doesn't even believe in God, and they end up not believing in God also. So we see that when you go in two directions, you confuse other people, and people end up doing the wrong things. That's why Eliahu actually asked the people, until when are you going to step in the both directions? And that's even worse than idolatry. And that's maybe what our sages wanted to teach us by putting this additional story after the reading of the Torah. Don't think that just the ordinary act of idolatry of a golden calf, who was going to bow down to a golden calf? You're nuts. Parentheses, the golden calf actually moved. It was a golden thing, but it moved, it ate, etc. But the point is, who's going to bow down to idolatry? Forget it. I'm not an idolater. I'm this and that, etc., etc. Our sages say, be careful, because there's another state in which, it looks confusing, but it's even worse than idolatry itself.